This video we are going to talk about what is a constructor and why is it useful for us to know the differences between different types of constructor. So the first constructor is called default constructor, the another constructor is called parameterized constructor, and the third constructor is called name constructor. So as you can see over here, we have the values. We have provided these values by simply just typing the nickname, the object name along with that value. So we have provided the value. So is there any way that we can get this value with the directly class that we have? We wanted to see what is the default constructor first. So for that, we'll type the class name along with parenthesis and with curly bracket. In over here we wanted to see the value of print statement, so we are going to type default in order to check it will be defaultly available for all the scenarios. So we have given it a value, so that's the reason before any code execution we are getting this default right over here. So now I wanted to convert this default constructor into a parameterized constructor. How you can do that? For now we have one id and another one is name. To have int id and after that use a comma, and after that we wanted to have a string name. So this default constructor now have two parameters to follow. One is called id and another one is called name. So now we have to give this condition in order for this constructor to follow. So for that we are going to use this id is referring to this id, and now we wanted to give this id a value which we have locally defined over here. So that's the reason we are going to use id and end the statement with a semicolon. So now if you have an underscore before that, you don't need to give this value right over here because it will directly be known as a private value. So that's the reason it will take that. We have talked about what is a private class and what is a public class. If you use underscore before that, so it will know that this is a private value, so it will take that value. So that's the reason we are not going to provide underscore before that. And now we wanted to give the name value as same as the locally defined value. So for that we wanted to have this value. We are going to use this keyword and after that name, and give that name a value to be stored onto this local name that we have right now. So we'll use name again, and after that end the statement again with a semicolon. You see we have some errors over here. Why is that we are having this errors? Because we have separately provided this value. Now we can just directly go ahead and provide this value right over here, because this is the parameters that your constructor have to follow and you have to fulfill that values right over here. So how you can do that? On the first scenario is id, so we'll provide the id number 16 right over here, and after that use a comma again, and after that we have to provide the name value. So I have provided this value. So now we have no use for this code because we have directly given this value, because class will have some parameters that we have custom defined over here. And now you can go ahead and remove this value right now because we have reduced this lines of code over here. So we have to provide the value as well for here. Then go ahead and remove this value. If you run your application, it will work just fine because you have provided this value with the parameter condition that you have provided. We understand this concept, but can be trimmed down to a further extent, so you can do that. Before this .id, why do we have to locally define when we have the value right over here? So for that we are going to use this dot and after that id. So this .id will refer to this id directly. So now you can go ahead and remove this, and we are going to do this same for this as well. So now this .id is referring to this id and this .name is referring to this name. So you can go ahead and remove this curly brackets and end the statement with a semicolon. So this is what you call your parameterized constructor. You have converted your default constructor to a parameterized constructor. So that's the reason you could not have a default constructor now. So what is custom name constructor then? I wanted to have a custom name constructor right now. For that I'm going to use dot and after that name constructor. So this is my custom name constructor right now. So we have this value, so we can go ahead and remove this value right now. So now we have some error right over here. So you can use the dot, and after that you can just go ahead and use the name constructor that you have created right over here, and you have provided the value. So the issue will be fixed right now. This is how you use the custom name constructor, and this is how you use the parameterized constructor. So this is the difference between default constructor, parameterized constructor, and custom name constructor. So one thing you have to note is that you can have the custom name constructor along with the parameterized constructor, but you cannot have the default constructor